A power which has led her first to fear God and now to trust in Him. Notice her confession in verse 9. I know that the Lord hath given you the land. The other citizens of Jericho and the other citizens of the various Canaanite cities had heard the same report. They had heard about the power of God. But they did not say, we know that the Lord has given Jehovah the land. Rather, they said, well, so far he has conquered the Egyptians. Looks bad for us. He's conquered Og and he's conquered Sihon. That looks bad for us too. But we've got the walls of Jericho. And we're safe behind the walls of Jericho. And surely this God will not be able to get behind the walls of Jericho. And so the same report did not work faith in the hearts of the rest of the people of Jericho. Rather, it hardened their hearts and caused them to trust more and more in their walls, whereas Rahab's heart was softened by the same report. And notice she makes this confession, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, before the walls of Jericho have fallen. She makes this confession to two spies whose lives are at that point in mortal danger. And she makes that confession at great personal risk to herself. She also confesses not only is God the one true God, that He is a God of great power who has given the land to His people. She confesses something of God's mercy and goodness to His people. And God has begun to work in her a desire to share in that mercy and goodness by becoming part of the people of Israel. Notice verse 9 again. I know that the Lord hath given you the land. I know, therefore, that Jehovah has given the land to the people of Israel as a free gift of His love, as a place where you will then be able to worship your God. Notice too the covenantal language, the Lord your God. I know that this God, Jehovah, is a God who is your God. A God, therefore, with whom you have a relationship. And I know that I do not have such a relationship with the gods of the heathen. He's your God. And one day Rahab will be able to say, He's my God too. The Lord, my God. We see that also in that word kindness in verse 12. That word kindness is the word used in Scripture of God's covenant love and mercy. God's unfailing mercy in His covenant. Deal with me kindly. Show kindness unto my father's house. And the spies promise in return, in verse 14, we will deal kindly and truly with thee, according to God's covenant mercy and according to God's covenant truth. And this kindness and this truth are shown to God's people in the covenant of grace, that perfect bond of friendship that exists between Jehovah God in heaven and His people on the earth. And Rahab is a member of that covenant. Born outside of the people of God, she is a member of that covenant by grace, through faith, and God is bringing her in, engrafting her into Jesus Christ, into the covenant people of God. She heard a rumor about God, a report about God, she believed it. She confesses what she believes about God, as little as that is compared to what we can confess, because she had very little information to go on. and her faith shows itself in action. And her action, summarized in our text as, she received the spies with peace. These spies were two men sent by Joshua to glean information on the land of Canaan, in particular Jericho, to find out about its inhabitants, its defenses, and its morale. And when they arrive in Jericho, Providence directs them to her house. At this point, Rahab most likely did not know who these two men were. They were simply two strangers who had arrived in the city, and she had lodging for them. But the king of Jericho found out who these two men were, and now Rahab knows who the nature of her two guests are. And immediately, Rahab acts. She does not take the two men to the door and say, "Here are the spies, kill them." Rather, she took them to the roof of her house. She hid them under the stalks of flax which she had dried up there, which was the custom of that day. And she told the messengers of the king that the men have gone. Chase after them as far through the Jordan, and you will find them. And as an extra precaution then, the king ordered the gates to be closed, and the spies are now trapped in Jericho, a hostile city, where they have no friends except this woman, Rahab. The Lord has led them to the one house where they can have a safe reception. And before the spies can lie down to sleep, blissfully unaware of the danger they are now in, Rahab comes up to speak to them. And she confesses to these two spies her faith in Jehovah God. And she asks for mercy. Mercy for herself and mercy for her family. She sees these two men, therefore, as representatives of God's people, Israel, and therefore representatives of the true and living God. And this is remarkable given the circumstances of these two spies. These spies would appear to be at the mercy of Rahab. But Rahab sees it the other way around. She is at the mercy of these two spies, and therefore at the mercy of the God of these two spies. And they agree to help. They say, if you don't tell anyone our business, if you arrange for it that you and all your family stay in this house, if you put a sign on the window so we know which house it is, we promise you, by the Lord, that we will spare you when we come to take the city which God will give to us. Rahab then is satisfied with this promise and sends the two spies out the window, lowers them down to the ground with a rope, and tells them to go into the mountains and hide there for 3 days. And our text says that she received these two spies with peace. With peace. Remember, these two spies did not come bringing peace to Jericho, but rather these two spies come with war against Jericho. And it was the duty as a citizen of Jericho that Rahab would take these two men and give them to the king, and the king would question them and then most likely put them to death, because these two men were a threat to the safety of Jericho. And if Rahab had been loyal to her citizenship as one of Jericho, that's exactly what she would have done. But she has her eye fixed on a different citizenship. Her eye of faith is fixed upon the citizenship of Israel and ultimately on the citizenship of heaven above. And so her faith causes her to take the side of the church of Jesus Christ in the world. Here's Rahab in Jericho. She believes in the living God because she has heard of the living God. And God sends to her 2 fellow believers. These are the first believers that she ever met. And he sends them to her house. And now she has the opportunity to confess her faith in Jehovah God and to show love and mercy to these 2 fellow believers. And when one believes in God, he puts believers first. That's his first allegiance after God. God's people, and very, very far after that, the world. And if your citizenship in the world interferes with your duty toward God's people, then you put God's people first, even if that costs you a lot. Even if that cost you, and could have cost Rahab, her life itself. That was Rahab the harlot. She believed, and therefore she received the spies, God's men, God's representatives, with peace. We read in the text, Rahab perished not. Rahab perished not. Everyone else in Jericho perished, except those who were associated with Rahab herself and stayed in her house. Now Rahab has the promise of God's messengers, that if she stays in the house, she will have salvation. She will not perish in the fall of Jericho. And Rahab knew and was certain of this, that Jericho was going to perish, and everyone in that city was going to perish. She had heard what had happened to the Egyptians, how they had perished in the Red Sea. She had heard what had happened to Sihon, king of Heshbon, in Numbers 21. Israel had asked this king if they could pass through his land in peace. He came out against them in war, and God utterly destroyed them. Rahab had heard what had happened to Og, king of Bashan. Same thing happened to him. He was utterly destroyed in war. And now Israel starved before Jericho, and God has devoted the entire city to destruction, and Rahab has secured for herself the promise that she will be spared. And you can imagine Rahab waiting for the day when Jericho would fall and she would be spared. She has no idea how that is actually going to happen, but she knows it will happen. Remember, her house is on the wall, so she has a good lookout, as it were, for any Israelites who might come her way. And after days have passed, we don't know how many, she sees Israel coming. Doom for Jericho, salvation for her. And her faith must have been tested as much as the faith of Israel was tested by what happened those 7 days. She expects to be delivered, and what happens? They walk around the city and go back to their camp, and this happens for 7 days. She must have wondered, what in the world are those Israelites doing? They promised to come and save me. Why haven't they saved me yet? But she waited and trusted, and eventually God gave her what she asked for. Because on the 7th day, the walls of the city fell flat, except the part of the wall on which Rahab's house was built. Miraculously, that part of the wall was not destroyed.